A new class of platforms is emerging to support intelligent applications, or maybe we should say systems, that are going to change the way that businesses organize and operate. Intelligent data apps differ from traditional enterprise software in that rather than having processes hard-coded into applications, these new systems can learn and adapt their processes to changing market and business conditions. These systems treat business processes, not just data, as assets. This means analytics can inform and agents can orchestrate their ecosystem with far greater agility and more impactful business outcomes. Now, one company, Salesforce, is on a path to accelerate this vision and, we believe, could become the fourth hyperscaler, but one that is software only. And we're talking about software apps in a different context. Today, in this episode of The Road to Intelligent Data Apps, George Gilbert and I will explore this premise, and to do so, we welcome David Schmaier, who's President and Chief Product Officer, and Srini Tallapragada, who's President, Chief Engineering, and Customer Success Officer at Salesforce. Welcome all. Good to see you all.
Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for making some time. It's great to have you. Let's start by asking our guests, we had a fascinating conversation just now about the word applications. So let's frame that. How are applications changing now that they're data and AI driven versus hard-coded business applications of the past? Can you both comment on this? Srini, maybe you can start and then David chime in.
Yeah, so I think historically, I think, again, when people think of apps, the mental model everybody think of is I have a screen, I have a form, I have some fields, maybe I have some workflows. That's what it is. And essentially, the applications are hard coding, if you will, business processes. So people set up some business process in their workflows and then do it. What is changing is, and they tend to be, how are they they putting these processes? Basically, there's a policy document somewhere, somebody read it and then did it. Where this is changing, especially with the advent of AI and business apps, which we call agentic apps, is people want much more dynamic nature. There'll be humans which are using, but a lot of times they'll have digital agents helping them doing most of the work. And those agents don't need such structured ways of looking at it. And I think where this is changing is ability to understand, reason dynamically, so that the agents you can give a high-level task and it'll do the job using some of the underlying business models, the data structures, and the workflows and APIs. It's able to reason. That's where it's changing. So I think it's a foundational change, in my opinion. And that's why and people want to hire digital agents or digital labor. That's why we call it a digital labor platform. But David, you can add more.
Yeah, please, David.
To add on to that, we believe that AI changes simply everything. And as you all know, Salesforce, we helped pioneer this term software as a service 25 years ago. And we just announced our fourth quarter of our fiscal year, and we just crossed 10 billion for a quarter in revenue. So putting us at over 40 billion run rate, making us the second largest software company in the world. So that strategy has been an amazingly positive strategy. We have over 200,000 customers with small, medium, and large customers all over the world in all industries. But what we see is going from software as a service to service as software. And what we mean by that is with this agentic AI solutions that you're now going to have humans and AI working together. And how big is this agentic AI market and how big is the service as software market? If you literally add up the salaries and the amount of money and the fully loaded costs of all of the people in sales, in marketing, in service, in e-commerce, in operations, in finance, in manufacturing, and supply chain, all across the company, what we believe is this is 1 to 2 orders of magnitude larger than software as a service. So it's an enormous opportunity. Our total addressable market just increased exponentially. And we couldn't be more excited about now leading the second wave of service as software with Agentforce and Agentic AI.
Yeah, we love big TAMs, guys. And very interesting, I would say over 10 years ago, we said that Salesforce was going to be the next great software company, and you certainly have achieved that. So let me move on. We think there are 4 key ingredients necessary to achieve this vision that you guys are laying out. You got to have a data and integration platform. You have to have an analytics system that can inform and automate decision. You've got to have tools and apps that are building blocks for developers, and you've got to have out-of-the-box agents and also tools to build custom agents that, very importantly, can learn from activities that are too difficult to, or maybe too expensive to code procedurally in sort of the legacy, application business. So to our guests, how is this different from, say, a specialized vendor, like take a Snowflake or a Databricks or an SAP? Could you explain why, in your view, the whole of what you're building is greater than the sum of the parts?
Yeah, maybe I'll start, and Srini, feel free to add in. We think of it, we like the way you're describing the 4 categories. We think of it as the holy trinity, which is there's the data layer, then there's the apps, and then there's the agents. And when we think, if you look at it that way, only Salesforce has all 3 of those. And the secret sauce is this deeply unified platform that Srini and his incredible engineering team have built. And I'm sure he'll double click on how that really works. But the data is not just a custom data lake, but it's the data, but also the metadata, which is the semantic meaning of, the metadata means the data about the data. And so this is like, what does a product really mean? Or what does a sales opportunity really mean? Or what does an order really mean? We have all that built in over 25 years in this rich, metadata-driven, 24/7, trusted, fault-tolerant platform that we've built that powers literally, millions and millions of customer conversations all around the world. And so now we built applications on top of that deeply unified platform over the last 25 years. We've had a big initiative at Salesforce where we've taken our biggest acquisitions like Tableau and Demandware and others, Revenue Cloud products, and we built those onto the core Salesforce platform. So now you literally get one deeply unified platform with all of the metadata and the metadata there available to you. Now, the 2 magic elements that are new in the Salesforce platform are the Data Cloud and Agentforce. So Data Cloud is the fastest growing organically built Salesforce product in history. It's growing about twice as fast in the first 4 or 5 years as Databricks or Snowflake grew as independent companies. And I believe in the future, every single Salesforce customer is going to use the Data Cloud. And the Data Cloud is amazing because it's already there. So you don't have to build the custom star schema. You don't have to be a computer hobbyist and do this yourself. You can just literally turn it on. That's one of the cool things about it. But second, it's just not a data warehouse. Now you can take that data lake and power the actions. So you can go from the data, which is harmonized across hundreds or even thousands of systems, and you can power the actions for that customer. And on top of that, it has a harmonization layer of fuzzy and direct matching so that you get a single golden record, maybe, for you, George, or for you, Srini. So now I actually know who my customers are. Imagine that. And that's kind of the C in CRM, which is knowing who your customers are so that you can then do magical things. And now if you layer on Agentforce on top of it, the proof of this is, we can literally turn on agents in minutes for companies that use Salesforce. And during our 3 days at Dreamforce, people walked in with their laptop and we had sort of a campground of experts. And with like 5 or 10 minutes of upskilling, people themselves could create agents for big companies, companies like Firestone and companies like Disney and Accenture and Carnegie Learning and Heathrow Airport. You see the ads with Matthew McConaughey talking about all their success. And so we turned on 10,600 customers with Agentforce in 3 days at Dreamforce. And then our 4th quarter, we reported 5,200 more customers. So we think it's the largest onboarding of AI agents in human history. So it's very, very exciting. But the key is it's not just a set of data lake technology. It's a data lake with these customer 360 apps that we're known for sales and service and marketing and commerce. And oh, by the way, they're the number one apps in every category. But then on top of that, there's this new agentic layer that's trusted, and you can literally turn these agents on in minutes or hours or certainly days, not months or years.
Thank you for that, David. I mean, you're speaking our language, data, apps, agents, harmonizing that data. And the Matthew McConaughey commercials are, by the way, genius. George and I have spent so much time on this. George, I've learned a lot just sort of working with you. Maybe you can explain, because you've talked to me about this a lot, and maybe set up the map that agents are going to need, and how that's different from, say, tabular data that sits within an RDBMS. And maybe you could dig into that and set up the next sort of section here, George.
So maybe, Srini, this is for you to help us differentiate, but most data platforms today, if they want to define, or if they aspire to define the semantics of their data, that's the metrics and dimensions for sort of BI dashboards. But you guys have gone way beyond that with the customer 360 profile, which is, it's not just about the customer as an entity, but it's the customer journey. And the reason I want to bring this up is you're potentially federating queries or caching data from external sources, and your value add is sort of this semantic harmonization layer above that. And the reason our understanding is it's important is agents are only as good as their ability to perceive the state of the business, which is like, it's a map, a 4D map. And if you just have like a data lake, it's like a 2D ledger. And the reason we think this is important, and we want to get your thoughts on this, is there's something like 100 customer agent startups valued at 500 million or more, but they're all going to need this highly enriched data that you have about the state of the customer. And it almost seems like we're going to be in this situation where Zynga thought, well, we could build this wonderful game on Facebook, and then the social graph, was the source of truth for them, and that turned out to capture a lot of the value. And this was a long way of asking a question. I know the pricing isn't out yet, but do you see this this data platform as really what's going to be powering all these agents, and at some point capturing a lot of the value that they are trying to create?
So I think it's a great question. And I think this is why, by the way, one of the discussion, all of this also is very critical, is security and compliance and data residency with the world, with where it's going. So we have to think about that too. So as we were thinking about 4 years back, we started on this new journey. We had to build at every layer, like David explained. First, we had to build Hyperforce, which is our infrastructure layer, to provide security, compliance, and all. On top of that, we had to build the data layer. Data layer has two parts: the traditional transactions, correct, layer, which Salesforce is known for, which everybody puts transaction data, but also a lake house embedded in, surrounded with the metadata we are talking, and then we rewrote all our business applications, so the business processes are there, and we did the agentic layer. But the specific question you're asking is very important, because one of the most common use cases, which we all have been chasing, is this real-time 360 profile, correct? Every company wants to provide their customer a personalized, one-on-one, unique experience. And they spent hundreds of like a lot of industry has been there. We all have been chasing, all of us collectively in this industry. And at different points, based on the technology of the time, we are trying to move this ball. But if you look at a data graph, why we call it a data graph or a 360 profile, which is a real-time profile, is historically, if you look at, again, the industry, a lot of data model, governance in a company, usually. Their ERD diagrams, people know what it is. what used to happen is by the time I'm sure every executive here knows, like you go into a meeting and people are saying, hey, what is the attrition rate? No, that's not my definition. Like I defined it differently, or everybody is debating the metrics, which is why people said we need a semantic model. And the BI, when you started doing BI, this need came. But the BI was a separate stack. It is not connected to the operational stack. Same thing. Then people said, oh, I don't have the data. So then people started building warehouses and then data lakes and all. But again, it's a separate stack. And so the person who's making that call, and the simple example, which most customers still can't do it, is when maybe I was a gold customer, I just added something to my cart, and then now I'm a platinum customer in the thing, but it doesn't reflect me. Maybe I want to give a special offer. Maybe if I buy another $20, I'll become a platinum customer. So this requires a data graph, which is both real time, based on what I'm doing currently, the historic with a semantic meaning. So the data graph, almost you should think, is a normalized form of real-time data, correct, which is getting computed, the cumulative data, maybe my order history. It is to say maybe some counters, and it all has to happen available in a multi-second, because the world is all real time. So what we had to do is we had to think of that use case and build not only the transaction system, the lakehouse system. And by the way, the data, we never assume it's all in to create this profile. That's what everybody wants. The problem is each of the sources of data, some of it is in Salesforce, some of it is outside Salesforce in another transaction system, and some of it people have their own lakes. So one of the reasons we have to build data cloud is to not only do what is in Salesforce, but also ability to what we call a zero copy integration to all the vendors with all the partnerships, so that ultimately we can create this profile. And then when the agent looks at it, it can react, and you tie that profile. So this is where the semantic model definition ties to the data graph, and a lot of the elements in the data graph are just the semantic definition. So NRR, maybe my order total, my gold platinum, can come from the semantic model definition, plus my real-time metrics, plus sometimes the batch metrics. But when the agent is asking, saying, hey, tell me about Srini, what can I offer? It just needs the heavy lift, if you will be on this. So all agents need four things, correct? They need what the role they're supposed to do. Am I a sales rep? I'm a service rep. I'm acting as a developer, whatever is the role. And what is the role description? That's what our apps have encoded over years. We exactly know what a sales rep does in financial services industry, or wealth manager, totally different than what a CPG sales rep does, totally different than what a pharma rep does, how they are measured, what they're done. We have encoded that. An agent also, just like a human, needs access to data. And a lot of times that data is in the data graph. We materializes in the data graph, but really the data is federated in a lot of different systems in the company. Then you want to do an action. Again, action, to get the action, there are a lot of things people have invested in Salesforce, which is great, but we assume people don't have all the actions. That's why most people have gateways, and usually most customers we see, that's where MuleSoft comes in. People have created that application toolkit because that's what is action. It's already wired in. And then, of course, you have the surfaces, whether it's mobile or web or WhatsApp or something. But all of it has to be tied through a trust layer, because otherwise, people are worried about hallucinations, bias and all, and compliance and data residency and all of that. So this is what we had to build over years. To your point, can you do it? When you say deeply integrated platform, it's not only deeply integrated, but very open, because sometimes a customer may say, hey, I'm going to use these three pieces, but I want to federate that. Now, this is the difference we are talking about when we say we are an application or in a digital labor platform and not a IaaS layer. If you look at the individual boxes, you can do it yourself, definitely, because if you look at all the vendors provide all the pieces, and it's a huge effort. And I think most customers realize is version 1 is always easy. Software is like a garden, correct? Version 1 is cool. And half the developers leave to do some other thing, but who's going to maintain it? Who's going to upgrade it? Who's going to patch it? So the cost becomes prohibitive, which is why people come to application platforms. And this is, unless there are few companies which can afford DIY, maybe for most companies, that they want a platform for us. So this is how the semantic layer tied to the data graph, which contains to the integrated platform and really solves the foundational issue, which is what they want to create one-on-one personalized connection with their end customers. That's how we see all these threads coming together.
So let me follow up on that thought just for a sec, because it sounds like you've built in all the scaffolding for customer-related data and processes, so that sort of out of the box that works really easily. And MuleSoft sounds like, from what we learned from MK and Alice, that it's a critical next step in that it's not the traditional way of building data or application integration pipelines, that you've got an agentic sort of development environment where you can specify more what you want to accomplish, and then the agent figures out how to do it. It's almost like SQL. You specify what, and the optimizer figures out how.
Exactly.
And that
this is what the reasoning engines are very good at. The LLMs, the reasoning engines are very good at is previously we had to write the next steps,
Yes.
but it needs to, it will figure out what the actions it has to do, but then to do the action, it needs a catalog of actions. And that's what MuleSoft publishes the catalog to Agentforce. So it already knows that these are the things I need to do. If I want to do a get an order status, you don't need to write, say, now next step is get an order status. It knows I need to get an order status, but then it looks at the catalog, which MuleSoft publishes. Oh, I can do this. So I'll go call that.
But MuleSoft also is helping you abstract that the application and data estate beyond what you've done out of the box for customer-related data and processes.
Exactly, because there'll be a lot of SAP systems. So that's why I think, which is also the term we are using Agentforce consciously, because it is not a CRM use case. We are an enterprise-wide platform. You can build any agent. You can build HR agents, financial agents, and all, because we have built the necessary plumbing, the reasoning engine, the different data federation, the API gateways, so that you can build anything. Obviously, if out of the box, we will ship a lot of agents. Like if you want a financial services agent or a wealth manager agent, we'll automatically do it, but nothing stopping. We have a lot of ISVs will build specific agents, and of course our customers and trailblazers will build hundreds of specific agents that they want.
So let me ask a question about analytics. Actually, or Dave, were you going to cover this one? I forgot.
Well,
I'd be happy to.
Go ahead.
Well, one thing I was going to just add to the last answer.
Please, David.
If you looked at the demo we showed at Dreamforce, where the customer, Saks Fifth Avenue, they used a voice-activated AI agent to change an order and do a return and exchange, and then get a new, in this case, a sweater at a Saks Fifth Ave store. Really what we showed there is this is very different than DIY AI. So first we had the technology in the data cloud to know who the customer actually is that I talked about earlier, this golden record. Then we had the ability with this metadata low code and no code platform, where right on stage with a couple of mouse clicks, we were able to add a few more actions and access the action library, and then call the inventory management system that would look into the worldwide store inventory for the product that the customer was looking for, and then change it right there on the fly, so that the next time you called the agent and literally talked to the agent, it would give you what you want. Now, if you're building that yourself with a hyperscaler, you'd have to build this data lake and star schema. You'd have to build the ability to harmonize all of the data across all these, your hundreds or thousands of systems yourself. You'd have to build the action library of all the actions, where we literally just turned on two new actions on stage. You'd need to have something like MuleSoft, and MuleSoft's part of the Salesforce family, because the APIs are what we call the skills of the agent. So you can invoke, in this case, the inventory system and the payment systems to sort of complete that transaction end to end across the enterprise. And then, of course, the commerce capabilities and the order management capabilities are endemic to all of that. So there are some people who would say, well, gee, in this agentic age, we don't really need enterprise software anymore. Like, we think that's complete hogwash. It's just not true. Like, we think what you need is this holy trinity that I mentioned earlier. You need the data platform, and Srini mentioned it briefly, but Hyperforce runs on the hyperscalers. So you get to leverage the full power of the hyperscaler. We've done that work for you. Then the data lake is already built in with the data and the metadata and the semantic layer. And then the most important part too is the metadata and the semantic layer allow us to have far greater levels of accuracy than an LLM by itself. Because the LLM by itself is scraping the internet or just looking at a variety of different data sources that are not necessarily trusted. And we've also built something called the trust layer, which screens out things that just aren't acceptable in business, like bias or hate speech or other things that just simply don't work in the business world. And so we're able to find far higher levels of accuracy than just plugging in LMs by themselves. And then one other thing I would say compared to the DIY AI approach is Srini has a gentleman who runs our AI research lab, who's a Stanford professor of machine learning and AI. And when you use Agentforce and Data Cloud and our Customer 360, you don't have to hire a Stanford professor. You just get to use the work that this guy does on our platform. But his team built our Atlas reasoning engine, which we think gives like far higher levels of reasoning and accuracy and less hallucinations. It can answer sort of semantically more sophisticated questions than just an LLM by itself. So we think the whole stack really provides benefits at all layers. And that's why you can literally turn on agents in minutes, because all those parts of the stack already exist. They're already proven and they're already trusted.
You know, David, that example you gave is fairly complex, that product returns example. That's not trivial. People maybe don't realize that. And yeah, building that yourself, not to mention you've got to bring in all that metadata, then you got to harmonize it, which not a trivial thing to do. And you got to govern it. There's got to be a governance piece in there that you guys, I think, have internally. And yeah, some people would say you just need agents talking to a CRUD database. Some people like Satya Nadella, but of course we know he's just responding to Benioff's Clippy comments, and it's just fun. But it is kind of BS. And although there is some truth that you're going to need agents as an abstraction layer. But I want to ask you, just to follow up, that example that you described, I think you said it was Saks, that all occurred within the Salesforce platform, or were you accessing data? I think you called it, you had a zero copy integration. Was there a zero copy integration involved where you were bringing in data, whether it's through materialized views or whatever, or was it all within the Salesforce?
No, so we have today 400 zero copy connectors into the data cloud. And then MuleSoft is the #1 API management system in the world. So MuleSoft basically connects to everything. And if you ask Postman, they would say the #1 set of accessed APIs in the world are Salesforce. So we have APIs for virtually everything. And then through MuleSoft, you can get SAP to your website data, customer engagement data, to your payment system data, to your set-top box and your product device data. We can literally connect to anything. We do digital twins in the automotive industry. We connect through Swift to the financial back office systems. In telcos, we can connect to the billing and provisioning systems. So we're sort of experts at that via MuleSoft and just by having an open platform. But back to your specific question, in that example, we called the inventory management system through the APIs that you can get to in Agentforce. And we called the payment systems, to make the payment reconciliation with the exchange. And so it was a simple example, but what's really cool is Agentforce is a platform. So maybe you start with this return agent, which is where Saks started, but Saks has a whole long list of agents they're implementing. And because it's a platform, then they can go to #2 and #5 and #8, or like Camping World or Equinix or Goodyear, like they're all starting with their first agent example, and we're sort of monitoring this, and we're seeing like an explosion of agents within our thousands of Agentforce customers, and we're doing it ourselves. I think last I checked, I thought we had something on the order of 12 to 14 on a list of over 30 agents that we're implementing both internally and externally. Like if you want to try out Agentforce, go to help@salesforce.com, help.salesforce.com, or go to salesforce.com itself, and you can ask questions of like, do you have a product for financial services? What's your API management system? How do you harmonize records via the zero copy alliance, as you said? And if you ask those questions, an AI agent can give you 100% accurate answers.
Very cool. Well, let's talk about analytics. How do you think about taking if you think about today's state-of-the-art analytics, like BI and ML, how do you take that beyond counting things in the case of BI, and in the case of machine learning, it can narrowly project the past into sort of a future view, but that view is still kind of telescopic. How do you migrate that toward what you're referring to, which is orchestrating activities, aligning the business processes at all time, cost of time series, and all the functions within an organization, and with those top-down goals, George, that you always talk about. In other words, how do you take business operations from navigating by looking in the rearview mirror to this new type of system where analytics can apply to the processes, not just to the data, and orchestrate a business outcome? How do you think about that?
Maybe I'll take a start, and then David, you can add. I think the dream of analytics, when you say analytics, BI, and all of this, basically, as an operational executive, all of us, we want to know what's happening today, correct? And tell me what I'm trying to project, what's going to happen. And if something goes good or bad, I want to understand the reasoning. And typically, the answer is usually you go to a meeting, and either people are debating about whether the dashboard is right, the metrics only when things are wrong. Like when things are right is when people say, but I don't think the number is right. That's why the semantic model definitions are very important. And then what also is required is, at the time, you need the feedback loop. When something went wrong and you're analyzing, you want the loop back so that the analytics are able to get predictive. This is like real what I call holy grail. And because historically the transaction systems are different from the analytics systems, which are different from the data lakes, it was all very hard. And which is why I had to build this integrated platform so that, hey, we can now use a new class of technology, where you want to ask data. And when people have tried, like, even including Tableau, we all tried with Ask Data and things like that. But now the LLMs have given us a much powerful way of reasoning, so we can really ask the data. And I get insights, because most of the time people want insights pushed to them. And we have a product called Tableau Pulse, which does that. And the real trick is, and we are seeing with agents, and we are seeing with help.salesforce.com, what you really want is, when the agent is answering something, we are looking at the agent analytics. Just like agents used to be on performance management plans too, like to see whether they're doing good or not. And then based on the answers, we are able to feed back to the analytics and say, hey, now we need to change the answers. Maybe the knowledge article is missing, or these additional APIs are there. It's the feedback loop, which is what is required. And so that's why the analytics space is going to totally change the way we are thinking. And in fact, which is why we're going to announce big time at Dreamforce, our next generation of Tableau. We call it Tableau Unified Analytics, which is again tied into this unified platform. And leverages really machine learning and AI and all of that. So I think that's the holy trinity. Again, now you can understand, if you have data, you have the apps, and you have these agents, and then there's an analytic layer rotating across, you can see the feedback loops are getting better and better. That's our technical vision, and that's what we are delivering. And I feel the entire analytics market is going to get a big change with we are announcing some of it at Trailhead DX, and our Tableau conference, I think it'll be a reset of the market.
Yeah, George, interesting comments just now by Srini on Tableau. That was one of the, last year at Dreamforce, I think it was Ryan, president of Tableau, gave a talk, and George and I squinted through that and sort of taken a glimpse at, we got a glimpse at what you're going to announce this year at Salesforce. And George, you turned me on to that, but George, back to you.
Well, David, maybe you can elaborate on this, because I imagine you're going to be helping to shape the rollout, and how it's communicated. But and we hinted at this when we talked to MK and Alice, but there's these inner loops and outer loops, and even further outer loops of learning, and that's part of a system. They're no longer products and components. That an agent may learn from the outcomes of its actions, and the outcomes could be measured in how it moves a KPI or whether it successfully executes a transaction. But then the team of agents or an army of agents could be part of updating like a tree of key performance indicators tracked in a shared set of metrics and models that Tableau keeps track of. In other words, that it's not any one model or component that's getting smarter, it's the overall system is getting smarter about anticipating what's going to happen in the marketplace, and then realigning operations to be to have a higher fidelity representation. Am I trying to explain that right, or maybe you can add some color?
Sure. Let me elaborate. Like, I've been working on analytics for most of my 30+ year career, and everyone would always use the term insights into actions or analytics for everyone, and yet that hasn't fully happened. And so the promise of both of those statements hasn't fully been realized. And we think the world's about to change, as Srini said very well, in the analytic universe. And one of the things that you'll see with Tableau Next, which we're going to start to roll out at TDX, is now Tableau is entirely harmonized and built on the Salesforce unified platform. It's what that means is now when I'm talking to an agent, I can actually see the analytics from the agent. Like, the agent can present like a mini dashboard or an analytical analysis right there within Agentforce, and it can take the result of that analysis and do something proactively based on that. So that's really insights into actions. It's not just looking at dashboards, which was a big deal like 25 years ago, but now it's kind of passé. This is like, hey, I really want to, and this is why the semantic layer, which is part of Tableau Next, is so important. It builds on top of the metadata and gives you a rich semantic meaning of what's going on. And this is, all of these layers, the harmonized data, the metadata, the semantic layer, my view is, simply put, the data powers the AI, and the AI will power the customer experience and the employee experience and the partner experience of the future. But it all starts with that data. And so we built learning, as I think MK and Ryan and Alice and others told you, into all of this, into the Atlas Reasoning Engine, into the data cloud, into everything that we do. And so when you go from agent to multi-agent, our agents outperform others because we have the world's most sophisticated repository of customer data. So if you ask a CEO, they want to see all the data, but what's the most important data? It's definitely the customer data. There's no question about it. And, we're bigger in the CRM space than the next 6 players combined. So we have more customer data than any other company in the world. And now, if you can visualize that data, if you can really understand who your customers are, and you can act on behalf of those customers, and you can do that with I would call it sort of a mashup of Tableau and this semantic layer and the data cloud, and then our customer 360 apps in sales and service and marketing and commerce. And now you've probably been noticing we're rolling out industry-specific versions of Agentforce. So the analytics for those industries, like maybe it's the single view of the subscriber for a media company, or maybe it's the credit score for a banking customer and how many products do they have, you can use that now to invoke actions either by the humans or by the agents. Or again, our vision is it's going to be AI and humans working together to help customers. But it's definitely going to make these systems smarter and more intelligent.
Let me just follow up on that, just for a brief clarification. You talked about insight to action was a dream we had for decades, but it seems like now you're able to align the activities of humans or agents and their human supervisors so that it's not just like insight to action with sort of the human being the loose end. It's you're aligning the activity of this entire organization of silicon and carbon intelligence toward some aligned goals. There might be process-specific ones or task-specific ones, but you have higher level ones like your revenue growth objectives or your sustainability objectives. And it sounds like that's the new insight to action. It's for the entire organization.
Yeah, a couple comments on that, and then Srini, you might want to double click on this. One last thing I meant to say in that last explanation is, so this is why multi-agent can potentially outperform single agent, because if the data powers better performance in one agent, if that data is now powering multiple agents, it's going to have that same multiplicative effect. And then if each agent is learning and adding to that rich data repository and that semantic layer and that metadata and that rich meaning of like what's really going on, and what you're trying to do is model the real world and then act in the real world just like people do. Like that's what the neurons in our brain do, is we're sort of taking in all this data and acting accordingly. This is starting to really approximate that. And so back to the Dreamforce demo, we called the first agent that did the sweater exchange for Saks, Sophie. But at the end, we showed a agent monitoring dashboard where there was another agent called Joe and another one called Mary, and there were different agents doing different things. And we envision a world, and I think it's starting to happen now, where agents from different companies are working together. And there's a very interesting demo that we sometimes show where if the agents start talking to each other and they realize that the other person they're talking to is also an agent, then they can start talking in machine language, not in English or in Spanish. And so they can have a higher baud rate communication, which sometimes scares people because then we sort of lost control of what the agents are actually talking about. But that's a different problem. But Srini, maybe you want to elaborate on this, like, because the research org is a key part of your organization.
I think that maybe meta point, which I think maybe helps is, usually when you hire a new employee, like humans, correct, have a day zero problem. In the sense, when you hire a new employee, they're starting at ground zero and you have to enable them. If I start a new agent, correct, a new instance of an agent, it is already knows all the knowledge of the previous agent, correct? So that's one thing the agents can do. The second thing which humans have is, I meet 10 customers, I've learned. You meet 10 customers, you learned a lot. And then from my brain to translate to brain is hard. So which is why people create these documentation systems we're trying to do, but onboarding. So human transfer of knowledge happens. That's why writing and all these tools we do to do that. What agents do, like what we are able to do with agents, is the day zero problem where every new agent is as though they are the most experienced agent. And all these agents are learning from different scenarios and they're sharing much faster. That's really. But the only way you can do it is if they share the common knowledge graph and the feedback loops. And then the humans are learning, the agents are learning. That's really the system. When we say system, essentially, that's really what is the unique, advantage. But you need a system so that you're learning. And I think that's where the productivity gains are going to come.
And I just want to pick up on one thing quickly. You had said at the bottom, there's that knowledge graph. All these agents and humans, they're non-deterministic systems, and they needed that deterministic artifact. That sounds kind of abstract. They needed a model of the world, a representation of the state of the world, which is a state of the business, that can serve to coordinate all their actions. And I assume that's what makes this learning system, that's that last piece that makes it
Exactly.
all come together.
Exactly. So which is why when we say metadata and we say semantic graph and when we say our APIs and we say these, which is why we said it's complicated. And then when we said customers, you can just go create an agent in 10 minutes and they're able to create, they see the magic. They say, how is that it's so easy? But like anything else, they're just seeing the small part of it. There's a big, deep infrastructure platform, unified platform, which we have been building for the last 4 years, all of it, which makes it possible. And I think that may be a great summary the way you asked.
Great. Can we talk a little bit about adoption? You guys gave us some metrics from your last earnings call, which was pretty impressive. If you think about ERP, it had a foot in the door, and whether it was manufacturing or accounting. Your wedge obviously is the customer data. David, you mentioned that's the most important data. Every company would agree with that. So you've got customer-related data, you've got analytics, you've got the process knowledge. How far do your aspirations extend beyond however you think about your current domain? You go back to the TAM conversation that you talked about before. Part of that is, reducing the human labor expense, but there's also kind of new areas of opportunity that perhaps weren't previously in the domain of Salesforce. How do you think about that?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just say on behalf of Srini and I and all of our colleagues at Salesforce, we couldn't be more excited about the future. I mean, software as a service is a tremendous market, and the front office part of that is one of the most attractive parts of that because that customer experience and that customer-rich information is so important. But services software is a multi-trillion-dollar marketplace, and we think this is a way to make, fundamentally transform business in a way that it's never been transformed before. And so like we leaned in heavily to literally help invent software as a service, we plan to do that for services software. Now, more specifically to your question, like in some of in our core product portfolio, we've already gone from what I would call the front office to the mid office. So like our Revenue Cloud has a product catalog, has CPQ, has an incredible, one of the jewels of our system is the order management system, which is, I would argue, the best order management system on the planet, a contracts management capability. So that extends into the mid office. And then in our verticals, like our 15 industry clouds, which are one of the fastest growing parts of our portfolio for financial services, for communications, our government cloud, for CPG, and now our newest is life sciences, which we're very, very excited about, which is great, a great marketplace where we can really transform the way that people can make people healthier and cure cancer and do other amazing things for the world. We're big believers also in technology for good as an important part of, what our value system at Salesforce, which I think is why we're able to attract such great talent on our teams. But we think that, those are really attractive opportunities, but we've gone there from the front to the mid office. But we think with agents and this Agentforce platform, we're building ourselves onboarding agents that we're doing with the likes of Workday and others. I approve all of my expenses in Slack using an agent for approvals in Coupa, Workday, Concur, and Salesforce. So I don't log into the apps. I just do it all in Slack. And that's another thing we haven't talked about. Slack is a really powerful part of this story, and Slack has been like accelerating in growth now that it's been more tightly integrated into Salesforce. We built the successor product to what we called Chatter 10 years ago in the social enterprise with what we call Salesforce channels. So now you can see all the activity of what's going on in Salesforce through Slack. And you're going to see new, really amazing capabilities coming out this year that even further tightens that integration between Slack and Salesforce. So we're very pumped up about Slack. And, if you think about it, what these LLMs do is, it's all driven by a conversational interface. And the best conversational interface in the enterprise is Slack. And so, Slack AI and now the Agentforce agents run within Slack. So we think it's very, very exciting to think about how Slack can become, like our Lightning user interface, one of the most important interfaces people use to manage their customer interactions.
Let me
Remember Chatter? I remember Chatter and
Still live
Salesforce
and well.
Classic. I still go in there every now and then.
Let me ask about this expansion that Dave was talking about, like working out from the customer, the way ERP worked out maybe from like General Ledger and from the MRP core. So right now there's like the data, the metadata, and then the rules in Flow and Apex, and so and that's layered so that you build on it, like corporate developers can build, ISVs can build. Are you thinking about a world where you might want to accelerate that process so that essentially the data, the metadata, and the rules about the processes are in sort of one artifact, like where it's like a real knowledge graph where essentially the processes are treated as assets, as composable assets, the same way you could do it with data, with the relational database. In other words, with the relational database, we took out the navigational logic. And here we might have to unify the business processes and the data about the state of the processes so that the processes are then easier to write. And I know this sounds horribly abstract, but the point I'm getting at is there a step change in productivity for Salesforce developers, for corporate developers, and for ISV developers to build out beyond that customer core for you to still have that harmonized layer that gets you into the additional processes? Does that make sense?
Yes, I think, yeah. So I think it's a great question. So let me try to translate and see if this. So one is to your point, to David's point. While we are expanding to mid office and all, the big thing with Agentforce also is redefinition of the platform is we are rebooting also. If you now you get a new set of partners who are saying, I'm going to build a whole new class of apps on the platform, because now they see the full power and they can do, and that because I mean, if people have been in the ecosystem, you understand that you can extend, but we extended it to every layer. So that's a big investment. And then to enable them, just like my internal developers are using heavily AI tools, we also released what we call Agentforce for Developers, where a lot of these can be generated. Totally, Apex can be generated, Flow can be generated, LWC can be generated. That's going to be, we've been running in betas. We are having more than 2 million lines of code. I mean, about 35,000 developers are using it right now in our beta. It's free. It's like anything on the platform. They can just use it. And at Trailhead DX next week, we are going to announce a big upgrade to that and give it to a lot more people for free on the developer sandboxes. And also to your point, to enable, because we build the platform now, even though we have a lot of developers, we can only do so much. We want the partner ecosystem to build a whole new class of applications and extend it, but we want to make it even more cheaper for them to do it. So one is all the licensing and how they do and how they make money. And David built a company on Salesforce, so he knows all the things to fix and is fixing that on the how we encourage that, but also all the tooling. And I think you'll see that as a big announcement next week. I don't know if LS and MK covered that part with you. But I think that's how all of this is coming together.
Yeah, we see incredible interest in Agentforce and Data Cloud for our ISV and partner community. And as Srini mentioned, after my Oracle Siebel days where I met Mark Benioff way back in the 80s, I built a company called Velocity on the Salesforce platform, so I know it well. 1,000-person company in 5 years that Salesforce acquired in 2020, and that's how I got to Salesforce. And if I was going to do that now, which, many new entrepreneurs are doing, and I would encourage them to do so. I would build it all on Agentforce and Data Cloud because the whole platform is metadata driven. So to your earlier question about the processes and the process capabilities, they are metadata driven. And so you can build your own process library that extends our process library. You can build your own actions, which are custom actions that extend our what we call standard actions. And increasingly, what we see is Data Cloud and Agentforce today, we charge in a consumption pricing manner. And we're in the not so distant future, our partners are going to be able to do the same thing, where they'll be able to charge also in a consumption manner through what we call our digital wallet, which is a single pane of glass where you can see, how much you're using over time. And the great thing is the CIOs love this model. They're used to this with hyperscalers where you pay for what you use. So you can spool up a free instance of a developer edition, and then you can try out these new capabilities. And if you like them, you can start using them, and then you start, paying as you go.
So I just want to recap.
And then I just say, I love the consumption model. I think that's the future of software. Procurement guys sometimes get a little sketchy about it because what happens is there's so much value to the business. They start consuming like crazy. And sometimes the consumption gets a little unpredictable.
I'm one of the biggest purchasers in my other day-to-day role from the hyperscalers. So I think I think like any other customers love the consumption model, but they also want the predictability of the license model. And because their CFO is saying, I really don't care, you can't keep going up and down. So it's a great point about the procurement getting a little bit antsy.
But at the end of the day, it aligns with value. I mean, I get it too from my controller all the time. It's like, why is our EC2, why is our AWS bill going up so much? It's because we're selling so much and we're spinning up all these supporting infrastructure around our clients, and that's a good thing as long as we're, profitable. So anyway, it's a fun conversation.
Right on. I hear Srini and I hear what you're saying all the time. But one difference is Agentforce really changes that conversation because what's amazing is let's take customer service, for example. If you now spool up 1,000 digital workers in service, the more you spend with us, the more money you save. Because you
sound like Jensen. Yeah, you sound like Jensen now, David.
Yeah,
the more you spend, the more you save.
It's kind of like alchemist's dream. You can take lead and turn it into gold.
But I'll say this. A lot of us, we have observers, have been analysts in the industry for a long time, as has George, and we look for these tech companies. We've got $1 trillion, valuations, Salesforce, several $100 billion in value. And so that's very alluring. But the real value that's created are the customers that are deploying these capabilities. And if you can find those guys, because we all deal with agents and contact centers, some are good experiences, some are horrible. They're clearly getting better, but when you go into these conditioned responses and you get so frustrated, some of the airlines, still living in the past, those are the companies that are really going to be diamonds in the rough and generate a lot of incremental value for investors, your customers.
I just want to recap one thing that I can't remember now whether it was Srini or David had said, which was that Agentforce for developers helps build out the metadata and the flows and essentially the artifacts to extend the application domain. And the bigger point, which Dave, you and I have touched on before, is that the agents and the sort of traditional software layer interact with each other just the way sort of mobile and cloud did. Each helped build the other out. And so doing one without the other is not as effective. That the agents, if you want to make something deterministic, repeatable, precise, and performant, you materialize it with traditional software artifacts. Whereas if you want to learn something that's kind of tacit and one-off, then that goes into the agent. And I just wanted to elaborate on it. I think it was Srini.
So I think the way you have to think about these technologies is it's like, it's not one size fits all, correct? There is a lot of, that's why you still need a data model, and for a lot of the specific use cases, you need that. And one of the things this technology is good is reasoning. So you're not writing all the steps, correct? So it's able to figure out. And then it's also good at generation. In generation, you want to say, hey, write this email in this format, or like summarize it better. So there is a little bit of, it can hallucinate a little bit on making it creative, but it cannot hallucinate on the data points in that. So you need citations and all. This is where our Atlas reasoning engine does a very great job. So like any other tool, it's a tool, and you have to use the tool for what it's good at. And don't try to say, just because you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So you need the solid foundation. You need all the controls. Basically, we didn't talk about attribute-based control systems, because ultimately the agent cannot do what it wants. It cannot show something. So you still need a really strong permissioning layer, an attribute-based data governance layer. So all of these, which is why when people think they can just do a small thing on the side, this is also the frustration for people where it's like, you see customers telling me that, oh, great demos. Okay, they've got so many POCs, but nobody is in production. And then, or finally they got one thing in production and they're stuck. What about the next version? Because if you don't have a platform, it all looks good. And actually, in a way, it's good. So there's a phase. What I tell customers is, hey, it's early. Experiment, it's okay. During experimentation, it's okay. You want to do it yourself, you want to quickly hack something to see. So you understand the thing. But when you're really trying to go big, you need a platform. Because who will do all of this for you? Just testing, correct? We have to build a testing center, because these are, like you mentioned multiple times, these are non-deterministic systems, stochastic systems. So the same request, the prompt request, can give a different answer. The version of the model changes, you get a different answer. So we have to build a testing center so that it can generate all these prompts and the responses, you can test it. So this is what we mean by a full platform. And I think, can you do it yourself? Can you connect all the dots? Yes. And then, like, usually, they'll find very frustrated that the cost of doing all of that becomes very high. And then that's when people who are coming to us are not coming because the first time they've tried, they've learned. They're saying, "Oh, wow, I need to fix all of these," and then they find a lot of value with us.
But if
Yeah,
I were to
It's fun to build software. Like Srini and I, we get to do this every day. So we love what we do. And the two of us and our chief trust officer, Brad, and a guy named Steve Fisher, like together, we have a team of over 20,000 people building this stuff. And so sometimes CTOs or CIOs say, hey, we can build stuff too, because it's fun to build things. But just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I remember when I started my career in enterprise software, people used to build their own accounting systems. And then they figured out, hey, it's just a general ledger and accounts payable system. Why don't I just buy the thing versus building it? And it's just way faster and costs way less money. It's better. Well, that's starting to happen in this AI, transformation. Like I'm back to where we started. I mean, I believe AI is going to change the world as we know it. And in a few years, not so very long, the world's going to be completely different. And so you need to move fast. Like each industry, there's going to be an Uber, and then in front of the Uber, there's going to be a Waymo that's going to be the disruptor, that's going to use AI to their advantage and to transform their industry, just like Amazon and Uber did, who are huge Salesforce customers. So Salesforce helps power those disruptors to win their industry. Like we want to do that for every winner of every industry and help them power that. But there's no reason to build all this stuff. I mean, maybe you have to build some stuff around the edges, and you can use our APIs to do so and to hook into Salesforce. But a lot of these pieces that we built, it's standard, COTS, commercially available, production grade, enterprise grade, ready software.
Yeah, if you're going to roll your own, there has to be such a compelling business case to do so. And because You basically have one customer. That's it, yourself. It just
I
doesn't
would
make a
think
lot
so,
of
Dave,
economic sense.
but people still do that. And what happens is, even if they can get it to work well, which I've only seen a handful of those in my entire career, then it immediately gets stale. Like Srini said it well, like our job's to keep upgrading it to the latest platform technologies, to keep integrating it with all the new players, to like listen to the customers and add what they want. Like now you're in the software business, like, it's a lot of work. Like, we put these 20,000 people, like they work hard. And we're working around the clock to make this stuff better and better and better. And now to add cool new things like Data Cloud and Agentforce, it's very hard to do that in an IT org.
What's the joke in the software business? If you're not going to come in on Saturday, don't even bother coming in on Sunday. Guys, we got to let you go. But this has been amazing. I mean, we potentially are witnessing the next platform hyperscaler, the software above the stack, above the infrastructure layer. We've talked about an expanding TAM. You're going to be lowering CapEx and OpEx for customers, driving top line growth and dropping profits to the bottom line. We can't thank you enough for your time. I know you've been super generous, and George and I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
You
you.
bet. And thank you for watching this episode of The Road to Intelligent Data Apps. This is Dave Vellante for George Gilbert. We'll see you next time.